The following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station or Pamel Broadcasting.
Good morning. This is 1 in 36, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 36 is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And today I'm speaking with Dave Cott, who is the founder of Autism at Face Value. You can find more information at facevaluecomics.wordpress.com, which is a long website. We'll repeat that a few times. We'll put it in the when we put this out so people can find you. But Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about what we're doing.
I think you're going to end up impressing our listeners by way of having a very cool, very fun, very engaging job. Whenever you have the opportunity to sort of start something yourself, it often comes from a really personal sort of motivation. So I'm going to ask you all about kind of what brought you to this point. But just looking at your website, looking at the smile on your face and some of the pictures and some of the stuff I saw on Facebook, where you have a good presence as well, just really could tell that you seem to really love what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I do. Today, I know we're going to be talking a little bit about how I'm using therapeutically applied Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role-playing, really. But just to kind of get listeners kind of up to speed on where we are now, kind of recognizes where we've been. Mm-hmm. So about a decade ago, I feel old now. About a decade ago, my partner and I and an artist friend, Sky Owens, worked together and we created the world's first comic book hero, featured hero with autism. And that was part of my doctoral research in the facial action coding system, where it freezes facial expressions. So an individual with autism, who was my primary audience for this, representation definitely matters. And we were beating that drum more than a decade ago about having quality representation. Sure, there may have been a comic book character suggested that might have autism, but they were a supervillain. Who wants that as their role model? So we took a lot of clinical symptoms and interwove a frozen static face expressing something like anger, sadness, fear, even surprise. These multicultural, universal expressions. Now, social context may change, but we froze those expressions on the page. We then added speech bubbles to say, I'm angry. And then the text box below would say, Joe is angry because whatever reason. So the readers didn't have to make eye contact. They could go at their own pace, look at the facial expressions, see the context of the words, and get an idea on how this individual might be feeling. And it helped build predictive empathy. Mm-hmm. So that was really good. We are the only comic book to be reviewed, thankfully favorably, in an accredited medical journal for the science behind what we had done. We won several international awards. We were on the NBC Nightly News. And it was a really good feeling to stand up for autism awareness. The tagline then was, join the fight against misunderstanding. Got some aliens and robots too. So the implications that it was going to be an action comic were there. And then some time passed. And I had one thing that my partner, Angie, we've been together, since Face Value Comics. It was funny when we first started dating. She said, what were you kind of looking at doing? And, what are you interested in? I was a therapist. A large part of my clients were on the spectrum. And I said, hey, I'm interested in doing this comic book. Individuals with autism are really kind of important to me. And she said, oh, well, my daughter's on the spectrum. Okay. So that was a good understanding. So I had built-in advocacy, being able to leverage a lot of the academic work and the social work that I had done for the benefit of our daughter, accessing services. And even now that she's a senior, looking ahead, the pathway that we kind of trailblazed in our small rural area seems to have some ripple effects. Now we have been able to branch out, and I've been offering therapeutically applied tabletop role-playing games as part of our nonprofit. And that's how we got the chance to meet.
Yeah.
Was there anything?
That's so cool. Okay, keep going. I'm writing down some questions, but I'll follow up with you after.
Sure. I think it's important to know that when I talk about like therapeutic D&D, that D&D is part of the nomenclature now, much like Kleenex is a tissue. If I ask you for a Kleenex, doesn't necessarily have to be Kleenex brand. Okay. So I prefer the Easy D6 system as well as Shadow Dark. They're just a lot simpler mechanics. The dice rolls and interpretation of those dice rolls can be done a lot more quickly. For a reference, a giant fight between the heroes and a dragon through D&D might take up to 2 hours. That's typically the full time that I have with a group of clients. So I need to make combat more expedient, as well as manage the dice rolls and turn orders without diluting the story or participant engagement. Part of, like I said, that's more where we had started talking together. And I remember you had asked, and a lot of people do, because it's the familiarity to tabletop role-playing games and what that is. We could have a room of 100 very classy veteran role players, and we're going to have 100 different interpretations on what a table is going to look like. For me, a totally immersive experience includes things like having a nice table dressing, a setting, we having sound dampening dice trays. So when you do roll the dice, you have multiple people. You don't have clang, 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 clang.
Right.
Having quality miniatures that represent their heroes as well. It's one thing to have a dwarf. I'm going to play a dwarf fighter. Pretty generic. I want to play a non-binary dwarf. I have that now.
Okay.
I want to play a dwarf in a wheelchair. Got you covered. Okay. Inclusion matters more than the autism. What I found a lot with my clients, I would say more than while I do go out into the community for other events and activities, certainly more than half of my clientele are young people on the spectrum, and they have vast interpretations on what a game is too. For one thing, example, we have some miniatures. Would it just something like this guy, little owl warrior, just set at the table, and players are able to maneuver around. If they want to fire their arrow, they want to go talk to somebody, they have a general idea on how the imagination visually works, and have to an earlier question about the immersive part and with the therapeutic part, recently had a beautiful exchange. There was a young lady who presents largely nonverbal. So how is she going to participate in a game where everybody takes turns and tells us what their characters are going to do? Thankfully, in the one rule set that I'd use, in this case, I'm going to call out Shadow Dark, there is a kind of a class, an ancestry that are fungus people. So yeah, think of it like a little mushroom guy, right? Okay. But they communicate telepathically through spores. So they don't need to verbally talk. I gave her a dry erase board and a marker, and she was able to keep track of everything going on, communicate in conversation with others at her pace, even though she presents as nonverbal. Wow. Those are kind of, that's a fun example of it. Another two was a character was trying to summon and build their confidence, and on each turn I had them ring a little bell. Okay, there's the bell, yep. And they would keep track of being attentive to other players' turns while they were building self-confidence. And I asked, how many times did you ring the bell? It should be an equal number of the players at the table. Oh, 3 or 4 players. Great. Add that bonus, that number to your next roll of the dice. Wow, I get +4 for just paying attention? Yes, because you felt very confident, and that's a skill that you can translate later on in life when you need to kind of calm down and kind of meditate, get a little bell out, something like that, even a marker on your phone. Those kind of little prompts really kind of help sell the characters. So many players really are invested in finding a pet, finding a little animal friend. So we weave those into the stories too, because that's a lot of pro-social interaction. Yes. We often mistake the idea that talking to another person is more, let's be real, we're all human, but I have players who want to talk to elves because they envision elves are this grand, regal race that they would present, and they have to match the tone. They have to match language. It's kind of like going for a big interview, but it's with a meeting with an elf. Yes. Yes. Go talk to the goblin. well, great, I'm going to blow my nose and burp a lot. And you have those kind of role-playing situations play out that we wouldn't have in other situations where players are really feeling like themselves. I've been issuing a lot of Likert scales lately to kind of test data. And the satisfaction that people are most agreeable to is the fact they believe that they can play characters that best represent themselves. I've had individuals.
I'm just going to interrupt you, Dave, for a second, because we're almost done with the first whole half of the interview, but you've given so much information, and I have a couple of follow-up questions. So I'm just going to, because that was such a beautiful place to kind of take a quick break, that a safe space for people to be themselves, but there's so many things that are coming up for me in terms of the therapeutic aspects of this, which I think you've hit on a lot of them. And also, your background and the social implications. So I think we should take our quick break now and then come back, and I might have some follow-up questions for a lot of what you just shared. All right.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Dave, this is awesome. So this is 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and we'll be right back.
If I could be you.
And you could be me.
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes. If you're talking, they will hear you.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy. So we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. Not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So talk, they hear you. You can do it if you try.
At Wheelchairs for Warriors, serving America's heroes is our mission. With your support, we serve veterans and first responders injured in the line of duty across the United States of America, providing them custom-fit, complex rehab mobility solutions to ensure they rejoin their lives at the highest level of independent mobility and function possible. Join the mission at wheelchairsforwarriors.org.
And now, 1 in 36 continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs program presented by the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm Eliza Bozensky, and I'm talking with Dave Kott, the founder of Autism at Face Value. Dave spent the first half of the show really getting into the work and what you're doing and why you're doing it, which is awesome. I want to just quickly highlight the fact that Autism at Face Value did receive a grant award from Anderson Foundation for Autism last year in 2024. We were thrilled to do that. The folks on the review committee who took a look at your application really thought, I think they were really struck by the creative, but also your background is so strong. You've got so many years of background in therapy and understanding and raising awareness. And so the combination of sort of that really solid professional background with something so joyous and social and important in terms of apply, like sometimes there's a gap, I think, between the knowledge, the scientific knowledge, the background, the individual therapy maybe, and then there's a gap between that and the practical application and enjoyment of the skills that somebody might be looking to learn. It's one thing to say that you've learned how to do something. It's another thing to be able to say that I enjoy doing that thing. So So I think that they were really struck by the tabletop gaming aspect of this, and that's a main reason why you all were a recipient of some grant funding. In the first half of the show, Dave, you talked about sort of therapeutically applied tabletop games. I'm going to start there. You gave some great examples of ways that you help and have things in place to be accessible, inclusive, to make it really clear that, yes, if you want to be a very specific character, we have that for you and we're welcoming it and you're going to get that, what you need. Can you give some other examples about some other aspects of the tabletop gaming that you're doing that are therapeutic, maybe in a different way? Maybe the social component. Are there things that happen when the game is over that you're starting to see, like longer term impact, things like that?
Yes. So one of the nice things that we can offer for the tabletop role playing is a natural off-board exit. So you're engaging in this therapeutic process. You do have the pro-social engagements, everything from waiting your turn to when you being able to remember what everyone else had said, to insert your character as part of yourself into the story and take an action. It could be something as simple as, I'm going to swing my sword at the dragon. I've had players do it with such panache because this was a time they felt that they were hitting a home run. They got a good test score. They got a date for Friday. They're going to swing at this dragon. And oh my goodness, they give a great story and everyone at the table applauds. They get that kind of satisfaction. Or when I roll the dice and, oh no, I got a terrible roll. Seeing and hearing the kids laugh, knowing that they got one up on the game master. They got one up on an adult. They got one up on an authority figure.
Yeah.
Cool. Now what are you going to do about that?
Right.
How do you interpret that? Two things about that is when they're done with our time, usually about 6 months or so, we look to move on to a different story in another group. But those same individuals can meet me in the community or other individuals, game masters in the community, in their comic shops, in their hobby stores, at the local library, and play games naturally. They have built in a system of understanding the generic rules. They probably have paid for their own miniature by now or their own dice. They collect these. This is kind of the hobby, getting in that mindset. And they find like-minded individuals. Can I tell you, Eliza, something really awesome is having a player with a year's worth of experience. They go across and aged into several different groups. And when that individual hits that gap in services and they're done, I see that individual at my gaming store and he pulls up a gaming chair and says, "Oh, do you play D&D here? Can I join in?"
That's great.
That's the natural support systems that we have in place. I had another individual for about a year. They role played as the opposite gender they presented biologically. And at the end of the session, they said, "Hey, everybody, thanks for a good game session. Thanks for accepting my character, who was a female. And I think now, with the practice and experience, I feel like it's comfortable for me to come out as trans." And they had that practicing of hearing how other people would respond to them as a female, to kind of get that female voice, to try different names, the intersectionality. You have autism over here, but it's a Venn diagram of the LGBT community, of individuals looking and needing meaningful work or volunteer services, higher education. It's so much more. And I'm finding thank you. You'd mentioned earlier that we had a pretty decent social media word of mouth. Our local community is getting so many more hits and inquiries and positivity, trying to see, hey, Dave, would you consider coming out here? We have some individuals on the spectrum. We have some individuals who are not on the spectrum. Can you make those work together? Sure. Our goal, and part of what the grant money was fueling, is to give people a taste of what we're doing therapeutically. Get a break from the monotonous onslaught of doom scrolling or social media or whatever news cycle's going on. We're always at the precipice of an economic collapse or war. I don't care who's president. That's always been said. But right now, a lot of people are saying, I need time with like-minded, safe individuals. Can I just have a good time? and roll
Yeah.
dice.
Yeah.
And that level of it's great.
I mean, you're hitting on so many things. And when you talked about the Venn diagram of, autism sort of over here, but then you've got all these other things. The other thing that you didn't say, but I think is really, even impacts an even broader audience, especially when you're saying that you can run these games with a mixture of, people who are neurodivergent and neurotypical. You've also got an age range, which for so many, regardless of where you are on the spectrum or not on the spectrum or in any sort of life circumstance, just being a young adult, being somebody who's moving from like a structured school system to sort of young adulthood, that itself can be an incredibly stressful and sort of life questioning kind of situation. So, I think your example of being able to sort of practice a lot of these things, in a gaming situation, I can see it on your face, but our listeners won't be able to see your face. But just the impact that has for you of seeing how like long term that can really impact somebody in a positive way. So you started to answer my second question, which might be all we have time for today. But if there was, assuming that there are other people out there, we know that there's lots of people out there who play tabletop games, who are really into this, who have maybe some of the materials that you need to get started, and wanted to follow suit, wanted to start something in their community similar to what you're doing, maybe on a smaller scale, but just something. And this is really speaking to them. What would be your advice? Are you available for advice? Is it just about setting up and inviting people? I mean, what do you want people to know about this movement? Because it feels like a movement.
Thank you. Wow. I've not had that comparison before, but I'm excited for it. And let me take advantage of it by saying I will make myself as available as I can. I typically work in the afternoons, evenings, because I with school a lot of the times. But email, hitting on our social media, getting a message to me, it'll get its way to me eventually through our board, the website.
Okay. Yep. I'm gonna shout that out. The website again is facevaluecomics.wordpress.com, and you can scroll around. It's a really beautiful website. There's a blog, there's an email address, there's Meet the Team, there's a great picture of you, Dave, and then the rest of your team and your board. So there's a lot of information there, and we'll put that out when we post this podcast as well. But so you're willing to put yourself out there to the degree you can.
Yes.
And I think that that's really great, even if it just helps somebody, just a word of encouragement to say, yes, you can.
Yes. The biggest piece of advice I would give somebody is just to do it. Nobody gave me permission to do this job. I kind of created it and cold called and said, hey, I can offer this for this amount of time. Is this a cool idea? And someone was brave enough to give me a chance. And it just kind of snowballed from there, gaining more years of traction. Being a D&D nerd all my life, I've been playing since, high school. So that's a tough amount of experience to kind of recreate. You don't have to be the best game master. You just have to manage the groups. And as long as you have some experience in managing groups, let them kill the dragon at the end if that makes them happy. It's okay. You can't get caught up in story. The player's satisfaction and giving them unique challenges, making a meaningful experience. That is the game.
I love what you just said, and it makes me think of one of my favorite things. And it kind of permeates through life in all of our lives. I think in so many ways, you're offering a shared experience, and it's maybe not a shared experience that everyone sort of universally goes through and has. But that's what you're offering. You're offering a shared experience for people to just be themselves, enjoy, again, some of those skills that they're working. Maybe at the same time, they're working really hard in other places on similar skills to apply in a work setting or an interview setting or a college setting, or a more one-on-one social setting. But you're offering it in a unique way. And I'm thinking, I live in a town where there's a comic book store, right in that town. And I'm already imagining that, for all I know, they might already be doing this, but certainly that would be a place where I could see lots of young adults going and finding sort of safe haven and a cool place. I really want to thank you. I'm even more impressed than I was when we first got your application. I think it's great. Anderson Foundation is happy to be supporting, Face Value, Autism at Face Value. I encourage our listeners to go to the website, check it out. It's facevaluecomics.wordpress.com, and just lots of great information. And Dave, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Keep us posted. It sounds great.
Thank you. We are very appreciative of the grant and all the people that we've met as a part of it. Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. This has really been a pleasure. This is 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 36, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism, celebrating their centennial in 2024. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.